Welcome to the Purple State of Mind podcast. On today's show, we will be discussing the ongoing Minnesota protests sparked by an ICE agent killing Renee Good, leading to threats of the Insurrection Act being invoked, as well as Trump's plan to acquire Greenland. Let's get rolling with Minnesota, which has become grounds of daily protests. On January 7th, Renee Good, a mother and a wife, was shot 3 times by an ICE agent, Jonathan Ross, in her car. Other ICE agents at the scene would not allow bystanders to check Good's pulse, and she was later pronounced dead. Before any investigations, the Trump administration immediately placed blame on Renee Good. Let's listen to what J.D. Vance had to say.
I'll take some questions, but I want to make just one final observation here. When I was actually walking out here, somebody sent me a photo of a CNN headline about what happened in Minneapolis. And this is the headline. I'm just going to read it. Outrage after ICE officer kills U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way to put it, and that is the way that many people in the corporate media have put this attack over the last 24 hours. And I say attack very, very intentionally, because this was an attack on federal law enforcement. This was an attack on law and order. This was an attack on the American people. The way that the media, by and large, has reported this story has been an absolute disgrace, and it puts our law enforcement officers at risk every single day. But what that headline leaves out is that that woman is part of a broader left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault, and to make it impossible for our ICE officers to do their job. If the media wants to tell the truth, they ought to tell the truth that a group of left-wing radicals have been working tirelessly, sometimes using domestic terror techniques to try to make it impossible for the President of the United States to do what the American people elected him to do, which is enforce our immigration laws.
Following the murder, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension said that the FBI had revoked their access to evidence of the shooting. The rest of the week, classes were canceled at Minneapolis public schools, and protests have become constant. On January 14th, a family of 6 was driving home from a basketball game and found themselves in the middle of an anti-ICE protest. Not wanting to hit anyone following the Renee Good situation, the confrontation led to ICE agents tear gassing their car. Destiny Jackson was then forced to give her 6-month-old child CPR after he had stopped breathing. Now, while law enforcement had not been targeting the family, the continued violence in Minnesota has come with anti-ICE protesters and ICE agents continuing to square up. While Governor Walz has mobilized the National Guard, President Trump has threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act and has 1,500 troops on standby. Here's Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey's response to that.
We are doing the work to keep people safe in our city, and specifically, it is our local police officers. It is the state of Minnesota and our governor. We are doing everything possible to keep the peace, notwithstanding this occupying force that has quite literally invaded our city. I mean, we've got 600 cops in the city of Minneapolis, and we're talking about 3,000 plus ICE agents and border control that have come in. They're not making our city safer. In fact, our city has been safe. Crime is down in virtually every category and virtually every neighborhood of the city.
You said occupying force. Don't you think it's a bit much?
I mean, look, you can go through whatever rhetorical flourish you want, but when you have 3,000 ICE agents and border control come to the city, when you've got this supposed threat of 1,500 military coming to the city, yeah, that's very much what it feels like. When you outnumber local police officers 5 and 6 to 1, that is the vibe. And so the bottom line is, if the goal were safety, this is not how you get there. If the goal is safety, I can give you a very antidote to some of the violence that we're seeing, and it's have them leave.
Overall, I'm a strong believer in immigration enforcement. I believe illegal immigration needs to be stopped. I believe in a safe border. That being said, the demeanor and the decorum of ICE agents in these metro cities has been it hasn't been representative of how law enforcement should behave. There's, first of all, they shouldn't be wearing masks. It's a debated topic, but in my opinion, they should not be wearing masks. When you sign up to be law enforcement, you know the risk that comes with the job. It is, in my opinion, it is wrong to conceal your face or identity, and storm into places of work and essentially detain people I'm not sure the exact statistic, but I know a lot of these cases these people don't necessarily have warrants to enter these properties. And additionally, with the killing of Renee Good, whether you think it's a murder or not, I'm trying to speak objectively here. Um, I think you can objectively say that the officer did not conduct a proper vehicular stop. And that's something that's been a recurring theme. I think that ICE as a whole needs to, first of all, uh, extend their training program again from the 5 weeks that they're doing now back to whatever 8, 12 weeks they're doing before at a minimum. And additionally, they need to do better vehicular stop training because there's been so many instances where there's been smashed windows within seconds. There's been, like Ishaan mentioned, the tear gas. That's sick. That shouldn't happen. Law enforcement should not be doing something like that. And kind of to get your thoughts on this, I wanted to ask, kind of in a more broad sense, how do you feel about ICE's actions nationally over the? I'm not going to talk. I'm going to just say over the last 2 months because there's been multiple instances in different parts of the country.
Yeah, well, the way I view it so far is that the way that ICE has gone about conducting their operations has been very on path with what the Trump administration has asked of them. So when we see stuff like this, when we see people killed in their cars, when we see families tear gassed in their cars, that is because the Trump administration wants this. They want this to happen. They want there to be tensions pushed. They want these protests. They want all of this because it means that they can continue to control the story. And that's also what we saw immediately after Renee Good was killed. Without any sort of investigation, without any sort of context behind what had happened, the vice president of the United States and Kristi Noem just decided all they wanted to do was label Renee Good as a domestic terrorist and claim that she had ties to some left-wing organizations. They clearly want to control the narrative regarding anything that happens. And I think it's very clear at this point that ICE agent, Jonathan Ross, was at fault for what he did. He wanted to shoot her. He wanted to kill her. And that's what he did. He killed her because he wanted to. And at this point, with Minnesota not being able to take over the investigation themselves and the FBI doing it, I don't expect much to come of this. I don't expect him to be held accountable. And all that does is reinforce what the Trump administration is doing so far. The way that they have deployed ICE is that this is basically a police state now. And we are going to control what you do and when you do it. And that's what ICE has been doing so far. So I know you probably disagree with that because in your eyes, law enforcement is always going to be in the right in this sense, or maybe not always in the right. I'd like to hear your thoughts about that, just because to me, what ICE has been doing so far is very counteractive to what we as Americans value. And this is kind of the reason why we separated from Britain in the first place. It was this exact reason. So I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is I definitely I would never commend Jonathan Ross for this. I would never condemn him because did I say condemn? I don't think I mean condemn. I mean I would never compliment or praise him.
Condone.
Yeah, condone. That's the word for it. But well, I mean, I think the situation was completely preventable. There are multiple accounts where they say that there's conflicting officers between the multiple ICE agents, or conflicting orders from the multiple ICE agents on scene. Some were telling her to drive off, some were telling her to stay in the car, or sorry, some were telling her to get out of the car. And then additionally, as usual training states, you should not walk in front of a car, a perp's car as a police officer. And additionally, the debate or the disagreement we'll have will be on the kind of justification. I don't necessarily have a flat out concrete opinion because actually kind of what my dad reminded me was we don't know all the facts. All we have is some grainy video footage. We have a couple different angles, but we should let the process play out. I feel like before as in the mainstream we should necessarily deem something fact or not. But as far as the intent goes, I really don't believe that Renee Good had any intent to hit that officer as her wheel turned immediately. But as far as his response, it didn't really look like a regular response to a threat to an officer's life. The way that he rapidly fired bullets and the way he reacted afterwards. And then kind of to the broader immigration sense, I understand the point. We were kind of founded for this reason. The United States was founded for this reason, to get away from this overarching authority from like Great Britain. However, when it comes to immigration, there were many instances, or I mean, I'll never say that these systems were completely proper or very efficient, but there's been many instances of amnesty being offered. I believe Ronald Reagan offered amnesty. I'm not too sure the exact details. I know President Obama made a few speeches about amnesty. Um, However, when I say that, like when I say I disagree, or when I say that I believe in strong immigration enforcement, I believe in humane immigration enforcement. So uh, the first thing is these law enforcement officers should still be treating these people humanely. There was an interview with a civilian in I think Minneapolis, who he was like, I don't get paid for this. I usually don't come out here, and he made a good point. They arrest someone, or they detain him, and then they continue to beat him. Like they'll detain him and then beat the pulp out of him. But
Mhm.
uh, and that's completely wrong. And then additionally, I said it many times before. I'm more of a conservative individual. I lie more on the right. However, the problem I'm seeing from the right wing and the far right is immediately branding these people off of their race, or branding these people something. There's some very nasty things said about Renee Good, and I would just like to point out she's still a victim. Whether you think she was murdered or killed, she's still a victim, because she was killed in a very preventable law enforcement encounter. And I understand her wife was kind of stoking the tension. They were, doing whatever to these officers.
Her wife was stoking the tension. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you there.
I mean,
What did she do? She said,
well,
"Our license plate is here. We'll be back here later." That's all she said.
well, the specific point I'm gonna say is when she told her wife to drive. That's something that's. I mean, I honestly
When she
think.
told her wife to leave the scene as she was legally allowed to, I really don't see
Well,
any
well,
problem
well. I
there.
mean, she committed a crime and she was asked to get out of the car. Like I said, there's
What crime
conflicting.
did she commit?
Obstruction of law enforcement operation. She was also parked in the center of the road with ICE vehicles trying to leave.
And she was leaving. I mean, she was leaving the scene, and she had
Well,
let other cars go in front of her. I really see the justification so far that people have tried to put out for the ICE agent of stoking the flame or whatever. Let's be very clear. The ICE agents wanted to kill her, and the ICE
yeah.
agents did it because that's what the Trump administration has done. They really do not care
Well,
about humanity at this point.
I disagree there, because I mean, what I mean by necessarily stoking the tension is that the wife was like Renee Good herself. She at least sounded a little calmer in her demeanor. But obviously this isn't justification to shoot someone in the face. I'm gonna say that beforehand. I hope everyone can get that that's implied. But first of all, the fact that the wife, just in my opinion, that's something that you just don't do. You don't tell your wife or whoever to drive off when they're being asked to get out of a car. When there's conflicting orders, they're not going to shoot you for not driving off. They would shoot. There's a bigger chance of you getting shot if you drive in the direction of an officer, even unintentionally. If you drive in the direction of an officer, whatever he's doing, you're much more likely to get shot than waiting and staying still and waiting for the proper order to come through.
I
Um,
mean, the fact that there was even a gun involved in this scenario is just
oh,
absurd to me.
absolutely. The fact he pulled his gun early is definitely telling of the situation. Like I think it's definitely telling. However, I I'm kind of forgetting my original point, but with the wife, what I was trying to say with the wife is that let me put it this way. So it's clear that the I'm not going to say Renee Good herself, but the wife had did not was not very smart in her actions, in my opinion. Um, because additionally, you would think person to person, if you're protesting against someone for being inhumane and brutal, I don't think the best option is to go and like essentially rage bait them. Like that's probably not a good option, in my opinion. And while I acknowledge that, I don't like that on the right wing, farther down the right wing. Um, the idea of like, F around and find out, that doesn't exist with law enforcement, bro. That's not how it works. When they say F around and find out, they mean up a gun on the officers, or they mean attack a group of officers, or commit a violent act towards a bunch of officers. They don't mean come and chat with them or come and say something, come argue with them, come yell at them. That doesn't mean F around and find out. And additionally, I mean, I hate to bring up another topic, but where was this when January 6th happened? Uh, where was this? Where was this? How come the police and law enforcement didn't get the same level of, blanket protection, or as President Trump called it, what did he say? Like absolute immunity, or was it Vance? I don't remember. How come those officers didn't get it during January 6th?
Well,
Another
hold on.
Minneapolis
Those
thing.
officers didn't need absolute immunity. Those officers were upholding the law.
Absolutely,
It was
absolutely.
the protesters. It was not the protesters.
Absolutely,
It was
absolutely.
the insurrectionists who got the blanket
That's
immunity
to
from
my
Donald
point.
Trump.
That's to my point. I mean, what more than blanket immunity from the president? I'm saying, where was this unconditional support for law enforcement during January 6th from
Yes.
further down the right wing? Moving to another Minneapolis topic, Jake Lang, or John, whatever his name is, Jeremy Lang, whatever, Jake Lang, the former J6er who was taken away by that mob today. Obviously, I don't think either of us condone him being taken away by a mob and allegedly he was stabbed. I'm not too sure how true that is. Obviously, we don't condone that. But what was the objective of him being there? He went there. He posted a video. This isn't like alleged. This isn't like Renee Good. She's allegedly she was harassing ICE officers all day, or allegedly she's tied to left wing organizations. This guy posted a video on Twitter. If you want, we can air it here. If not, it's fine. But where he said his objective was to go to the Minneapolis state capitol and burn a bunch of Qurans on it. What's the objective there? And we're so much more focused as a group. I'm going to talk about conservatives as a group. We're so much more focused on the fact he was taken away by a crowd, which I condone, and it's important to talk about. But there's no issue with I mean, there probably is, but in the overall movement, there's a lot of silence when it comes to that he wanted to burn a Quran or some of the other things he did. There's videos of him, doing the Nazi salute. He's consistently used racial slurs to describe immigrants and black people. And let's not forget the fact that there's video, like he tweeted. I'm sorry if I'm going on, but he tweeted that Tim Walz or Jacob Frey, whoever, personally told the police not to come help him, blah blah blah. There's video proof of this guy assaulting police officers on January 6th. There's a video of him reaching over kind of an arch where there's these police are barricaded, and you can see him trying to hit them, or you can see him trying to kind of stoke a fire in them, which is I don't get where the double standard comes from, because I understand these are two separate scenarios, but um, there should be some consistency. I misspoke right there, and I know I went on for a very long time, but I wanted to ask you, I mean, kind of what's your thought on that? I can pretty much assume. I think most people can assume, but I want to hear your exact thoughts on kind of that double standard, and I want to know if you think there's also that double standard on the left in any scenario, kind of related to
Yeah,
law
I mean,
enforcement.
yeah, for sure. Well, I think for starters, if we look at it from a more broad perspective, the problem here has not exactly been, I mean, it has been the ICE agents themselves, but the bigger problem is the response from the Trump administration. And that kind of touches on your point about this double standard with law enforcement, especially when it comes to January 6th. But I want to zoom out even more. And I really want to focus in on the way that they have responded to this scenario. And the problem that I've consistently had with this is that they have treated Renee Good like she is a domestic terrorist. That has been the consistent messaging from the administration. And on top of that, they have justified every single action of every single ICE agent thus far. That is a problem, because even when it comes to really anything else, people understand nuance, and people understand that there are some bad apples when it comes to law enforcement. But in this, what's been going on so far is they have said that ICE agents are going to get absolute immunity. And that's a problem, because what this ICE agent did to Renee Good is something that does not deserve immunity. But going to your idea about a double standard on the left, to this degree, I wouldn't be able to say that there is one. Now, there might be some stuff unrelated to this specific scenario, but right now, I don't really see a double standard when it comes to law enforcement here. I think people have been very clear that what happened to Renee Good, what happened to Destiny Jackson and her family, it is just incomprehensible. And here's the problem. Here's the real problem. what happens then when a liberal or somebody on the left eventually takes matters into their own hands and goes out and kills a bunch of ICE agents? Right? It's going to be awful, but it's going to give the Trump administration the justification that they need to continue to deploy troops. And then this is when we see tensions start to rise. Right. And it continues to happen because both sides are continuing to stoke the flames. And it all stems from the Trump administration understanding that when they deploy troops, something like this is bound to happen. And it just continues to rise and escalate and rise and escalate. And then what's the end? Is the end that everybody just packs up and goes home? I doubt it. When people are dead, I doubt that happens.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, if we're gonna talk about double standard on the left, it's usually has to do with it usually, I mean, I feel like in the context of the United States, the left is a lot more broad of a spectrum than the right now. Um and most of the quote unquote double standards have to do with like if it's economic policy or foreign aid or something like that. And it
Yeah,
defers
I don't see how it's
ideology
totally relevant right now.
yeah, it's not. And with the rights, it's a big concern because the way that the president and the vice president issued like kind of like a declaration almost, where they immediately declared the lady Renee Good a domestic terrorist and like the ICE agent. Like let's also talk about how they aired that the guy suffered from internal bleeding afterwards. Internal bleeding is such a broad term. You can use internal bleeding to describe anything. Have you ever seen that meme where like the guy's like, I'm an underwater ceramic technician, where and he's
I have not.
in reality he's a dishwasher? This is the exact same case because internal bleeding can mean anything from a little bruise on your arm, or in this case, I'm guessing for the officer, like his torso, all the way to like a broken rib, or it can mean. I mean, I'm no medical expert, but it can mean something very serious. Giving such a broad term kind of implies that they're just trying to make it look like he was hurt really bad as a
Yeah.
justification. Um, I mean, there's kind of nothing else I can express for this except for this is like on the right, like even further on the right, the biggest like there's a huge talking point where they're like, we haven't deported enough people. So not only have you not deported enough people, or you have deported much less than you promised you would. You're committing atrocities along the way, anyways. So it kind of begs. I mean, it begs the question: where are the results? Because there's so many tension stoking incidents and brazen violations of civil rights and civil liberties, and there's not much to show for it. It's not even effective. It hasn't been very effective. And
Okay, well, I wanna jump in here and I wanna ask you specifically about the the 1,500 troops that are on standby right now, and Trump threatening to invoke the Insurrection Act. What do you believe is the cause of? Why do you believe that he's doing this, and what do you believe his preferred outcome is?
well, the obvious question is the reason why he's doing this is because he wants to assert his power. Um, it's kind of weird because you wouldn't. This is I don't know how Republican lawmakers aren't like protesting in droves, because this is going to absolutely kill them in the midterms. Because you have to win over centrists. Obviously, you have to win over the moderates and the flip voters. Why would they vote for a guy that invokes the Insurrection Act? For I mean, as of right now, these protests aren't anywhere near the scale of the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests. And additionally, the way that it looks, I mean, I don't necessarily support Jacob Frey and Tim Walz in this situation, but I'd say you're making it look like it's a federal government versus state thing right now, and that's very bad because the federal government, uh, the states are also supposed to maintain their own rights. You know what I mean? It's there's a reason why the Constitution is the way the Constitution is, and the reason why there was that big schism between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists all those years ago. Um, then overall, his preferred outcome. I mean, we really don't know how extreme he can go, but probably to suppress these protests as much as he can and get people to bend to the will of him, meaning ICE as well. So um, I feel like during the election itself, while I do know that the plan itself was probably more foreseeable, it was definitely foreseeable. I feel like this level of inefficiency and civil violation was not foreseen because um, I don't think every voter knew that. I mean, I don't think every conservative voter knew that he was just going to appoint a bunch of cronies in his spot. Because in the first term, I think what really kept him kind of mellowed out, not even mellowed out, the thing that kept him from doing all this is he had experienced individuals in his cabinet. He didn't just have people that would back his agenda. Like Kristi Noem, I don't even think Kristi was she governor before? She wasn't even very popular as a governor. How did she get the nod as, Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security? Pam Bondi as well. I don't think she was very popular. How did she get the Attorney General nod? The one respectable appointment he has, in my opinion, is Marco Rubio. And the reason I'm going to say Marco Rubio is because he's been on the national stage in many different occasions. And I feel like and overall it's very worrisome because when he has a cabinet full of his cronies, you don't know what's going to come in the next 2 more years that he has in office, 2.5 more years.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and agree with you on Marco Rubio, being sane whatsoever. But I want to reference back when Pete Hegseth was being confirmed. A senator asked him, "Would you shoot protesters in the leg?" And the reason that was asked of him was because in Trump's first term, he asked his Secretary of Defense to shoot protesters in the leg, or he said, "Why don't we just shoot them in the leg?" And that kind of shows you the fact that he was not allowed to do stuff in his first term because he was kind of handicapped by that cabinet of his. And today, what we see is a cabinet that kind of bends to his will at all turns, especially Kristi Noem. But I want to quickly ask you before I finish what I was going to say here. What is it specifically about Tim Walz and Jacob Frey that you don't respect right now or you don't agree with them on when it comes to this immigration situation?
Like specifically this immigration situation, or do you mean as a whole with immigration in Minnesota?
I mean more so with the protests going on right now, the Insurrection Act being put forth, and all of this, the current stuff that's going on.
Actually, straightforward to the Insurrection Act. I mean, I don't see much problem because I feel like I have my grievances with both sides, but in this case, I don't think the Insurrection Act should be instituted, just because, first of all, it hasn't started yet. I mean, nothing has happened. I understand that you want to be prepared and things. He has troops on standby. However, the priority shouldn't be that. Or if you're gonna say that, then you should also have an open, transparent investigation into this Renee Good case. And additionally, I feel like the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement as an organization needs to be reevaluated because some of the standards they follow are illegitimate or what's the word, inadequate, because these people they join, they just, like, some of these people, I understand that, yeah, they may not have a degree, blah blah blah, it doesn't matter, but they just join and they take like a 5-week course or 6-week course and boom, they're out there on the field with an assault rifle, or they're out there with the ability, quote unquote ability, to detain someone or arrest them based off suspicion. There's been so many videos of people just being detained off of their accent. And
Well, remember, the Supreme Court legalized being able to stop people because of their race.
stopping
specifically
them
for
is
ICE.
one thing, but detain you. I mean, I'd expect you to understand this. There's been so many cases where they barely give you an opportunity to show your identification. They smash your window and
trust me, I know. I know, Sid. And the way that the reason I brought that up was because obviously you have a conservative majority at the Supreme Court.
Mhm.
But my point here is that everything that ICE has been doing, however much you might disagree with it, it is government sanctioned. It is purely
Absolutely,
government sanctioned right
what
now.
I'll
And that's
say
why
is
people need to be in the streets protesting this.
what I'll say is by government say, I mean, this doesn't make it legal necessarily. The one thing is the Supreme Court. We need to move back towards the checks and balances that were originally there, because right now the president essentially has again, he has all his people in Congress that, like the Senate Republicans, for example, they shut down the war powers thing for Venezuela. And then in the Supreme Court, while they're a little bit less Trump crony, they still go with him on many things. Like even I mean, this is a whole nother topic. Even the Epstein files, where are the releases? They released a bunch of redacted files. I think I probably could have. If I dug for the files, I'd find the same thing. There's like 3 words on each page. This administration hasn't complied with Congress. They haven't complied with the Supreme Court. Instead, they've kind of just twisted the Supreme Court and Congress's arms into bending to their will. And I mean, I really don't know why. I don't really understand why, because they have so much power to get rid of tyranny, or to get rid of, or to at least constrain the administration in some of its more radical approaches. But when you say government sanctioned, I'm not even going to say government sanctioned. I'm going to say it's Trump sanctioned. It's only sanctioned by the executive branch. Because in a lot of cases, I feel like the Supreme Court either says nothing, or they'll quietly rule. Quietly rule something. You don't see many opinion pieces from justices nowadays. You don't see their analysis.
The reason that I say government sanctioned as a whole is because the way that I view it is that not speaking up and not saying anything against it is capitulation in a way.
Yeah, it's complacency.
It's complacency. And if you're going to be complacent about something, in other words, you're allowing it to continue. And that's why I mean that it's government sanctioned, because if one branch of the government is sanctioning it and Congress is just bending to Trump's will at this point, Congress really doesn't have any autonomy, and the Supreme Court is either silent or they go with Trump, who's really pushing back on this? You have state government pushing back on it. You have people pushing back on it. But the entirety of the federal government has been very clear that their position is against the will of the American people right now. And if somebody had told the country that this was happening in 2024 during the election cycle, I think that there would have been real conversations about if this was as big of a deal as it is right now. So what I mean by that is I think people would have actually questioned their vote for Trump, especially a large portion of the Latino community, who Trump overwhelmingly overperformed with. But what I've seen so far is that law enforcement has completely lost any ability to reason, and the people who are protesting right now are protesting for good reason, and they should continue to protest until something changes. However, what that also means is that people have to be very careful to not escalate things. People have to be very careful to not bring a gun and start shooting at ICE agents, because all that will do is make the situation worse. And Jacob Frey touched on that as well, which I think his handling of the situation so far has been extremely good. Tim Walz's handling of the situation has been amazing. So I do want to commend Minnesota and Minneapolis Democrats right now, because the way that I've seen them handle this situation, take on Donald Trump, has been superb.
Yeah, I mean, in my, I don't know if I've talked about it in an episode. We've definitely talked about it in private conversations. I do not like Tim Walz. I do not like Tim Walz. I do not like Jacob Frey. However, it is very commendable the way that they stood up to the Trump administration, because while we may disagree on the policy front, and you know, especially things like welfare and some of the statements they make regarding the community that they foster, they're definitely standing up for their people, which I respect. And again, like, I very much agree with you right there. I agree with Jacob Frey with what he said. I mean, protesting is your legal right. Lawfulness is not your legal right. You don't have a legal right to be lawful or to fire at law enforcement. And additionally, by staying peaceful, you increase the chances of getting, of swaying the opinions of silent, reasonable people, because these justices, as conservative as they are, and as some of the subtly sketchy things they've done, I don't think you make it to justice of the Supreme Court if you don't have some some empathy, you know what I mean, or some kind of a moral perspective, because if on a peaceful protest the Trump administration invokes the Insurrection Act, then at some point they're gonna have to say something because and by peaceful I'm not talking about 2 billion damage peaceful. I'm talking about,
You mean 93% peaceful?
93%, whatever. $2 billion, bro. Imagine if it was 10%, bro. It would be like what, like 3 million, something like that. I don't know math.
But it was 93%.
Yeah. Okay, whatever the stats show. But like I said, I mean, I have no problem with civil discourse as long as it's lawful and as long as they don't, pillage and loot everywhere. But
yeah, and I think that civil disobedience is always okay, and civil
it's the
disobedience
most American
is what gets
thing.
you. It's
Civil
the most
disobedience
American
is
thing that
the
you
most
can do.
American thing. We learn about it in English in junior year. It
Mhm.
is the most American thing. Civil disobedience is very American. That's the way America was founded, was through civil disobedience and throwing some
So,
tea off a ship.
so I want to make one thing very clear. The actions of ICE thus far have been horrendous and catastrophic to the entirety of Minneapolis. And the people who are currently protesting in Minneapolis have a right to do so. But the problem obviously comes when they start to escalate things. But as long as they're able to keep their cool and they're able to protest peacefully, as though 93% of them were in 2020, I am perfectly fine with them continuing to do this. And I want them to continue doing this. And if Trump wants to invoke the Insurrection Act because he views this as a power grab, then let him. Because what that's going to do is it's going to make him less popular and it's going to overall help the country. Because when he is less popular, that means that Democrats then win in the midterms. And that means that what happens past 2026 is in the Democrats' hand. When you have a House of Representatives that's controlled by the Democrats, you control the funding for ICE. Right now, we are on day 12 before Congress has to pass a new funding bill, and Democrats have the power to once again shut down the government over ICE. Now, I want to quickly get your perspective on that before we jump into Greenland. Do you think that the way that ICE is conducting themselves right now, Democrats should be fighting to remove some funding from them or push for changes to the way that they're conducting their enforcement? Or what should they be doing before funding the government fully?
Okay. I think that they should hold out for a government shutdown until there are regulations and the reinstatement of proper law enforcement practices within ICE. I completely oppose representatives like Sri Tanindar who wants to abolish ICE. I don't think ICE should be abolished because, again, immigration enforcement is still important, but hold out until they reinforce some of these regular rules that they once had. Now, I just want to end with this. As a conservative, I'm stuck. I'm frozen. I feel like a lot of the moderate conservatives are frozen because you essentially have two options right now. And so you vote for an authoritarian that goes against traditional conservative values. He goes against small government. He goes against, so many of the things we criticize Democrats for, or we criticize liberals for when it comes to expanding government power. Because in this case, honestly, I feel like it's worse because, like, I'm all for shrinking welfare, but he shrinks welfare and then expands his own power. And now you're frozen where you have to pick between voting for a conservative, but these conservatives aren't necessarily traditional conservatives. They don't really believe in the true conservative values. They believe in kind of this new wave, this post Tea Party, uh, you know, populist conservative ideology, or you have to vote for a liberal. And I'm not going to make any claims now. I know I'm voting in November. You're going to vote in November. I'm not going to make any brash statements now, but you know, unless righteous candidates emerge everywhere, uh, there's not many options you have because um, if you really do care about the betterment of this country, then I don't think you're going to vote for a Trump aligned individual. And
Yeah. I'm just going to tell you this right now. I swear. If Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries get together and shut down the government over this and then eventually cave when Republicans offer body cams for ICE agents, Democrats as a whole need to work to be replacing both of them, and Democrats as a whole need to be replacing the entirety of the Democratic caucus that goes along with that. Because what we are seeing from ICE right now is even if you put body cams on them, even if you make them go through more training, these people have signed up to do the work that the Trump administration wants them to do. The Trump administration, and more specifically what Stephen Miller wants them to do, because I still view him as the architect of everything that's going on right now when it comes to
absolutely.
deportations.
There's a few things that I want. Body cams are like the bare minimum. No, it's less
Super
than the
bare
bare
minimum.
minimum. Yeah, like less than the bare minimum. Body cams, um, deep background checks into these individuals. Just like how they do for the police. You can't be a convict and become a cop. There's so background checks, body cams, the most in-depth, longest training process you can have. What's it called? Warrants when you enter certain properties, and proof or I mean, I understand. It's kind of. I mean, I don't really know how they do it. How do you provide proof that this person's illegal because you don't really know if they exist? Like, there's no legal documentation that proves they exist. However, ethical and better practices that do not alienate your civilian population or your legal population.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then also like I completely agree with you. I honestly think like I'm kind of a fan of. I mean, from a conservative perspective, I'm a fan of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer because they haven't been very effective recently. But also for the betterment of this country, we need good. Like I obviously hope for a true conservative majority where there's real conservatives, but you need good opponents. Like, you're not going to grow if there's no good opponents. You need to have good, proper opposition, or the majority and the opposition need to be good and proper. That's how you stoke growth. You know what they call Hakeem Jeffries, right?
What do they call him?
APAC Shakur.
Okay. You know, I would be perfectly fine if every single Democrat who's running in 2026 and 2028 completely rejects APAC. Actually, I feel like if you're a Democrat voting in a primary, or if you were a Democrat voting in a general election, that should be the number one concern at this point. It should be the number one thing you look at.
No,
Before looking at their voting records, before looking at anything else, are they controlled by APAC?
Yeah. More than that, I mean, even for Republicans, the issue that I have is like apart from like Thomas Massey and like Rand Paul, I think if you look at a candidate that doesn't take money from APAC, it's like the problem isn't that they take money from APAC. They're just blatantly like crazy in some of their other views. like what's that Florida guy's name? Fishback?
Oh, the dude running for governor?
Yeah, the guy running for governor. Have you seen his posts? He's like,
Explain it.
you'd expect him to be on Andrew Tate's stream. Like, you would expect him to show up on a Nick Fuentes stream. That's
but
worrisome.
he's not a typical politician, so
yeah,
he's golden.
It's worrisome. It's very worrisome because you just can't. You can't find one. You can't find a candidate. You can rarely find a candidate that has no dirt behind their back. Or
yeah, and I don't expect every candidate to be picture perfect.
I don't expect them to be
when
perfect.
you
But like,
are
I don't
taking-
expect you. Like,
when you're taking money from APAC and you're running against a candidate who's not taking money from APAC, I mean, I feel like I could tell you where I'm going to vote.
yeah,
I don't know about
pretty
you.
much. I mean, I don't necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily say that because that's very broad. Because like there could be like a politician that takes money from APAC but supports welfare or like whatever, shrinking welfare, but allowing immigration, legal immigration, blah blah blah. But then there can also be a candidate that's like they don't take money from APAC, but they also believe in like a 20-year immigration moratorium.
Okay, sure.
Like-
I'm not talking. I'm not talking like single issue voter. I'm talking about just like a baseline. See where people
like
are
in a
at.
primary, for example.
In a primary, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving along from APAC. I don't know how we got to APAC.
Yeah. I made a joke.
But I want to just come right back to Minnesota, and then we're going to jump into Greenland and really start talking about that. Overall, final thoughts on Minnesota. I'll start with you, and then I'll give you mine.
Final thoughts. ICE, behave yourself. Trump, please, no insurrection act. Protesters, protest lawfully. Republicans, stand up for yourself. Have a backbone. Don't bend to the president. And How else do I put this? Federal government, rational people in the federal government. I know there's some. There has to be. Like I'm not going to say everyone's bad. Please push for a transparent, fair investigation into the killing of Renee Good, because um, it's important, regardless of the opinions people form. It's important to let the legal process play out, just for the sanity of this country, just for the sanity of the legal process, a fair, transparent legal process.
Yeah, I think my biggest problem with the entire Renee Good situation and the entire situation in Minnesota is that eventually what's going to end up happening is we're going to forget about it and it's going to move on into the media cycle. And it's going to be this consistent process where something insanely bad happens, people protest it, people get mad about it, and then we forget about it because something else insanely bad happens. And that's kind of been the principle of the Trump administration throughout his 15 years in office so far, however long he served, or 10 years, 10 years in the public light. And we need to really move away from that. We really need to move away from forgetting about things and letting them die and letting them leave the media cycle, because all that's going to do is continue to enable Donald Trump to do whatever the hell he wants. And going specifically to Minnesota, to the people who are in the streets right now, continue to protest. You have the right to protest. The Minnesota government wants you to protest. The Minneapolis mayor wants you to continue to protest. But when you're protesting, make sure that you're doing it peacefully. And if something does happen, right, where one protester takes it into their own hands and decides that they want to play God and kill somebody because of it, that cannot be the overall trend. You can't start to continuously get more violent because then you see more retaliation. It's this continuous cycle where one side gets more violent and then the other side gets more violent, and we continue to see that like retribution type of thing. If somebody gets violent, stay peaceful. If ICE gets violent, stay peaceful and continue to protest. I mean, that's my final message. Continue to protest. But anyway, let's move on to Greenland.
Greenland sits at the center of a once quiet but now a frontline or headline geopolitical struggle. And it's very important for us to understand why it requires kind of the substance of the situation. Let's move away from like the manifest destiny, symbolism, etc. Greenland is not an independent country. This is going to be some base facts. It's not an independent country. It is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. With that autonomy, it has control over most of its domestic affairs, while Denmark controls its defense and foreign policy. One big thing is it's not a part of the EU. It left the European Economic Community in the 1980s because it's not a part of the EU, but it maintains a special partnership, a special status with the EU as an overseas territory. So it kind of creates a very politically unique state. It's self-governing, but strategically tied to both Europe and NATO. The value in Greenland isn't like population or size. It's fewer than 60,000 people, but the geography and resources are ideal. It occupies a critical position in the Arctic and North Atlantic. It hosts the American military's Patuxent Space Base, which was formerly an air base, and it plays a crucial role in missile detection, space surveillance as well, and overall Arctic defense. Especially as the Arctic ice recedes and as global warming and all that, it becomes much more accessible for shipping routes and mineral extraction. It holds some of the largest deposits of rare earth minerals and other critical minerals that are essential for modern technology and defense systems. The United States and the European Union view these resources as strategically important because a lot of these Western governments have been trying to reduce dependency on the Chinese supply chain. The issue in the modern era kind of emerged in 2019 when Trump publicly floated the idea of the United States purchasing Greenland. Trump framed it as a strategic and economic move, but Denmark outright rejected the idea. Greenland's government stated that the island was not for sale under any circumstances, and it caused a brief diplomatic rupture, which even resulted in the cancellation of an American State Department trip to Denmark. Even as the purchase proposal failed, the United States shifted its strategy. Instead of sovereignty, the Americans, or the United States, focused on deeper engagement, reopening an American consulate in Greenland, increasing investment funding, expanding diplomatic presence, and reinforcing military cooperation with Denmark. The underlying goal was always the same, was to ensure that Greenland stayed aligned with the United States and NATO and did not fall under the influence of rival powers. Now, from the European perspective, Greenland occupies a very sensitive space. Since the EU doesn't directly govern Greenland, its long-standing trade agreements, especially its ones on fisheries, which are very crucial to Europe, um, it's kind of very important to the sovereignty of Europe as a whole. Um, any unilateral move by the United States that will alter Greenland's special status as an EU overseas territory would directly influence the European economic and political sphere. Um, this is kind of where the current tension shaped. Uh, Particularly Emmanuel Macron, among European leaders, the French president, has argued that Europe should be willing to defend its strategic interests using economic power if necessary. So he's pushed for the EU to be less passive in the face of unilateral pressure, supporting tools like the official name anti-coercion instrument, but it's referred to as the EU's bazooka option, which allows the EU to retaliate rapidly against economic coercion. While no formal EU action has been taken specifically over Greenland, the logic is very clear. If a non EU power were seen as pressuring Denmark or reshaping Greenland's future through coercive leverage, the EU would face pressure to respond in order to preserve its credibility and internal unity. So overall, this Greenland saga is not about buying the land specifically. It's about security in the Arctic, control of the critical rare earth minerals that it has, cohesion between the United States and the EU and the rest of NATO, and how far are major powers willing to go to protect their long-term strategic interests. President Trump has reiterated this, that Greenland is vital to Western defense and supply chains, and Europe has been very clear that Greenland is part of its own strategic neighborhood, and it's a test of whether rules still matter among allies. Now, what I want to ask you is, I know you also did some research into this. So, what do you want to add to the context behind Greenland or the history?
Yeah, well, funny enough, I just saw this a couple hours ago. I just pulled this up, but Donald Trump said to the Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store, the Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store, he said that I'm just going to quote him directly. Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. Denmark cannot protect that land from Russia or China, and why do they have a right of ownership anyway? There are no written documents, it's only a boat that landed there hundreds of years ago, but we had boats landing there also. I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding, and now NATO should do something for the United States. The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Thank you, President DJT. Now, first of all, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where to start with this.
Yeah, that's repulsive. I mean, does he not? I mean, is he just going to ignore Article 5 of the NATO Charter? Like, I mean,
maybe, but I think what's been very clear since his first term is Trump doesn't really give a damn about NATO. He wants NATO to be completely torn apart.
No, but don't forget, he's done more than anybody else since NATO was.
My bad. Maybe more for Putin than anybody else.
Yeah, pretty much.
But, when it comes to Greenland, and I know you wanted me to add some context here. The way that I view this is very similar to why he's threatening to deploy the Insurrection Act in Minnesota goes back to George Orwell, power for the sake of power. Donald Trump is doing this because he can. And I think Donald Trump also doesn't want to be a president that in 100 years you look back on and say, who the hell was he? He wants people in 100 years to know who he was. He wants to have a legacy, whether that be totally positive, whether that be totally negative. He wants to have that legacy. And he wants to be remembered for something.
Whoa! I mean, really quick, if I pause you, I'll just say I think he's achieved that. Because have you seen the way he speaks? I mean, he's talking like he has nothing to lose. You know what I mean? Like,
well, he doesn't have anything to lose at this point. What does he have to lose? He has Congress bending at his will. He has the Supreme Court at his will. He appointed 3 Supreme Court justices that will forever alter the course of American history, who overturned Roe v. Wade. He has achieved his goal, but he is not done yet. And I think that's why he was really trying to get that Nobel Peace Prize, right? Because it signified something to him in that it was more power for him, it was more recognition for him, and it was doing something that President Obama did. First of all, before we continue this, did you see that picture? Did you see the picture of him and Machado with the Nobel Peace Prize?
No, I haven't. Let me look at it.
You have to look at that. He looks like a little kid getting handed a participation trophy with his mom
Oh
standing right
my
next to him.
goodness. Oh, he's
The
like
smile.
That's kind of
We're
cute.
gonna put
He's
it
like
up on.
cheesy. Yeah.
We're
He's
gonna
like
put it up on
cheesing
the
with his
screen
arm.
right now. It's really funny, and it's so pathetic, dude. It's so pathetic
It very
how
much is.
you can accept an award that was given to somebody else when they publicly said that you didn't deserve to win it, and you ran an entire campaign on winning that and you lost, and then you still took the award from somebody who wants something from you, who wants you to appoint them president of Venezuela. Absurd. Anyway, I went off on a tangent there. Let's go back to Greenland. Just finishing off, when you look at somebody like William McKinley, he expanded the U.S. and he acquired the Philippines, he acquired Guam, Puerto Rico, and he placed those protective tariffs that Trump has so far placed as well. And Trump has been, even in his State of the Union last year, he celebrated William McKinley. He said that he was a great president. And what Trump has tried to do is put himself in the legacy book. He wants to be considered one of the greatest presidents in American history. He said that before. He already puts himself up there with Abe Lincoln and George Washington, which is fun. But that's my idea as to why he's doing this. And when it comes to the national security stuff, it's already kind of in place. Like, we have control over it when it comes to NATO. We're allies with NATO. And if he wants to alienate us from NATO, I don't know what president in 4 years can then turn back to NATO and say, sorry, we just had a rough stretch. Like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, geopolitically, I mean, his first term was miles better than this one, and even that wasn't that good. Like his first of all, I've written a whole published research paper on this. I've talked about it in various clips. The Trump tariff plan was calculated using a ChatGPT formula. It doesn't work. It won't work. Like, if you look at it right now, sorry, I'm gonna relate this back to our current topic, but he said that these tariffs, hopefully in a few years, he can eliminate the income tax. The United States makes like something like $15 trillion from the income tax. These tariffs will, like, in a realistic time frame, at most generate $3 trillion. And you've already seen retaliatory tariffs being put in place. Even like just 1 or 2 days ago, India, the largest consumer of the world's largest consumer of things like lentils, peas, etc., levied a 30% tariff on peas and etc. Some of these certain, I forgot what they're called, but these certain crops from the United States. And the senators of Montana and what was the second state? I think it was South Dakota. They both petitioned to President Trump to raise the issue. Geopolitically, it's been just one big head scratcher. Just one big, where did this come from? Who wrote this plan? Like, how did this happen? Because you raise a very good point. What is the next president of the United States going to do? What can they do? Because you can't just go back. Yeah, I'm so sorry. My predecessor may have destroyed everything, but we're here to fix it. We're here to say sorry. You already have. You can probably strike a trade deal with Denmark if you really want, or you can strike a deal with Denmark if you want to do mineral extraction, etc. Because Denmark obviously doesn't want to rely on China. Like you said, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm not a military expert. There's a American space base on Greenland. If Russia or China were to attack Greenland, the United States would do something. It's pretty to protect their space base.
Well,
And
naturally,
I mean,
they're part of NATO. They're an ally of ours.
and then additionally, you have Article 5. It's a big head scratcher. It's a big ego thing. I like what you said, George Orwell. Power because it's power. Power for power.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not much I can say because it's really really tragic. It's really tragic that decades of diplomacy and building relationships. I admit, I bet Europe feels really really regretful right now that they didn't uphold their end of the bargain with the NATO budget. I bet they do because if worst case he pulls out of NATO, that's the worst case.
You know,
And
I'm just going to cut you off real quick, and I'm just going to say this. I think that the whole budget thing, and when he was saying that in his first term, I feel like a lot of it was just a justification for
oh no, of
trying
course
to
it was,
remove the U.S. from NATO rather
but
than actually something
yeah.
that he was concerned about.
Yeah, I'm not talking about his concern. I'm saying just my concern is that I bet they wish they upheld their fair share of the deal because
Yeah.
now NATO kind of loses its value. It's lost its biggest funder. It's lost its biggest budget. At that point, just create the EU plus Canada and whoever else is in NATO. So
Yeah, and I
the
think,
UK and like Turkey.
yeah,
So
I think when it comes to that losing the trust with other countries, it's not so much of, let's say, a Democrat does become president in 2028. It's not that another country wouldn't trust that president. It's that they don't trust the US to be stable after that president. And at that point, it's completely up to the American voters as to every single other country in NATO's national security. And I don't think that you can always count on that because when you elect somebody like Donald Trump, you are basically showing those voters, or you're showing those countries that their national security is at risk. And continuously relying on the US to provide that national security is something that you simply can't do because there's always the possibility of a president like Trump coming along and completely abolishing NATO at that point. JD Vance could abolish NATO. He's made it very clear that he doesn't view what Europe in general has done as something that he would want to continue funding or he would want to continue
I
um
Vance has been such a disappointment. I actually had hope for JD Vance. The way he spoke before and the way that he wrote in Hillbilly Elegy, I had hope. And
well,
the way he spoke,
Hillbilly Elegies
the
very overrated in my eyes.
one bright spot of the whole election was how JD Vance and Tim Walz debated respectfully on that stage. Somewhat.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know to what extent. They debated very respectfully. They had good decorum. And Vance was very articulate. I thought he spoke very well. But now he's out here speaking very well, but he's speaking a bunch of baloney. And
The thing about JD Vance in my eyes is that I actually agreed with you. I thought that he was going to be somewhat reasonable in this administration, and he's somehow become the worst person in that administration in some ways because the problem with him is he's very talented at politics, but he's able to and willing to conform whatever belief that he may or may not hold into something that fits the agenda. And when you see a president or you see a vice president who's able to do that, you question A, their motives, and you question B, whether or not they can be a solid governing force for the country. So in 4 years, if he's elected or if something happens to Trump within the next 3 years, if he becomes president, you do question who is he? What does he stand for? What is he going to do? Is he going to be the
we don't
JD Vance
know.
that we knew beforehand when he was an Ohio senator, or is he going to be the current JD Vance who just goes out and says that people are domestic terrorists because he doesn't like them? That's a big question mark, and it's something that we genuinely have to be concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, even some of his statements now have been like here's some of this is what the BBC reported. People do not. This is what Vance said. People do not realize that the entire missile defense infrastructure is partially dependent on Greenland. If God forbid the Russians and the Chinese, not saying they're going to, but if God forbid somebody launched a nuclear missile into our continent or they launched a nuclear missile at Europe, Greenland is a critical part of that missile defense. So ask yourself, have the Europeans, have the Danes done a proper job of securing Greenland and of making sure it can continue to serve as an anchor for world security and missile defense? I'm going to be honest with you. Greenland is very strategically important. However, I realistically think diplomatically you can make an agreement to where you can have all your missile detection software or whatever technology in Greenland without annexing it. Because like some of these offers here, what is it about? He's willing to offer $100,000 to every Greenlander if they whatever, if they join the United States. I mean, bro, where's my $100,000? I live here. I'm an American. Where's your $100,000?
Dude,
It
I'd
doesn't
love
add
that to
up.
pay for college. Like, come
Yeah,
on, man.
I would love that. I can pay for maybe a year, but like,
Maybe a
but
year and a half if we're
yeah,
lucky.
maybe. But you already have a base up there, and with just overall some of these things, I'm gonna go into the Greenland and EU relationship real quick. So they
Yeah.
signed. The latest framework was 2021 to 2027. It's renewed periodically. They have the EU Greenland Partnership Agreement. Um, Again, it's over the legal basis is the European Union's overseas cooperation, whatever that thing. The focus areas are about fisheries, which surprise. I mean, you would understand they're very important for food, fisheries and trade. Fisheries, raw materials, education and skills, and sustainable development. So the most important economic pillar of this relationship are fisheries. The EU receives fishing access to Greenlandic waters, and in exchange, the EU provides annual financial compensation in tens of millions of euros per year and sectoral support for Greenland's economy. And these fish products enter the EU tariff free. So it's very, very important for both economies. Then the part that should interest Americans the most in a defense sense is critical raw materials. Um, there's I've been working on something where I'm writing about where I kind of talk about how Taiwan is the most popular, most important place on Earth because of its semiconductors. Apart from semiconductors, you need rare earth materials, which China has a lot of. So the EU has formally designated Greenland as a strategic partner for critical raw materials. And the objective, which this is a much better solution to than tariffs, is diversify supply chains away from China. So there's rare earth elements, like I've said, graphite, zinc, and there's potential uranium, which can be enriched for nuclear programs. But that's all subject to Greenlandic law, however. Now, then you move to the investment framework. The EU promotes European investment over Chinese state linked firms, meaning that the EU and Greenland are moving away from China. They're moving away from China to prioritize Western alignment and their cooperation. They have screening mechanisms encouraged for foreign direct investment, and they now have environmental and labor standards embedded in their terms of cooperation. Then go to the geopolitical angle. The EU views Greenland as a buffer against Chinese Arctic expansion, and it is a stabilizing Arctic partner aligned with Western norms. Greenland, I'll repeat that, Greenland is aligned with Western norms. There shouldn't be a worry of China and Russia. This and also, like they said, whatever, making sure that Greenland is aligned with the West and the United States. It is. The European Union's coordination with Denmark about Greenland is mandatory. It's mandatory in their agreement. Now, the interests of the EU and the United States, they do overlap, but they're very complete, or they do compete, but they don't compete to the extent that it should be a worry for the United States. Both of them want reduced Chinese influence and secure mineral access. The EU prefers multilateral rules and trade agreements, while the US prefers leverage and coercion and the security first framing. So now trying to frame that into a question. I mean, again, this is something that's it's very obviously a head scratcher. I mean, what do you think would be the proper way to go about this? What should the United States really be doing if they cared about Greenland and the security and whatever whatsoever, all of that stuff?
Well, we have our 7th Fleet in Japan, and we're able to do that without annexing them. We're able to ensure across the world that our bases and our allies remain safe, and we keep them safe without annexing them. I think that's the biggest thing, right? What is it specifically about Greenland that Trump wants to annex them versus make them safe as we do for every single other country in the world who we're allies with? The as I continuously say, the reason that Trump does this is it's for power. And Donald Trump's continuous power grabs are becoming very apparent. And I'm going to ask you this. In what part do you think him not getting the Nobel Peace Prize is playing into this, because as I read that letter out before that he sent to the Norwegian Prime Minister, and I guess it's worth questioning, was what he was doing before and what he's doing now in any way because of the Nobel Peace Prize?
I mean,
And is
I
that
think
any way to conduct diplomacy?
yeah, no, I think he's salty. You should never conduct. It's common sense. You're controlling the most powerful nation on earth. You can't do diplomacy by awards and accolades. This isn't a college application. You don't need the best resume in the world based on Nobel Peace Prizes and etc. You should be there to represent the will of the people. If I'm being honest with you, I think the real thing with Greenland is China is larger than the United States by land. While the United States is larger by technicalities with land and water, China is larger than the United States by land. By adding Greenland, we passed them by like 700,000 square or cubic miles or square miles. I don't remember what the measurement is. I really think that the president is that's definitely a big part. That was something that was floated in the first Trump administration, that it would make the United States larger by land, which, I mean, I'm not too sure, because
Size
like
matters to him.
yeah.
Hand size.
Yeah,
Little Mark. Okay,
yeah,
when we're
but
talking about Marco Rubio and Donald Trump, we got to talk
yeah,
about that.
I mean, like, well, for first thing, I mean, I was just gonna add this in. We can talk about this if you want later. It's completely unrelated. I just had to say this. I honestly think Marco Rubio is the favorite to be the Republican nominee over JD Vance, because the right just clowns JD Vance on every occasion. Like, have you seen the
Everybody
edits of
clowns
him? They
JD
gave
Vance
him
on
a
every
Quaker wig.
occasion.
Because who knows? I mean, Marco Rubio in the next year could become like the president of Cuba, the president of Venezuela, the Tsar of Greenland. I feel like I haven't heard much from Marco Rubio about Greenland. I want to hear what he says, because, well, I mean, I don't expect it to be much different than what the president says. Um, you know, I'm very confused. I mean, if you've seen, I don't know if you've seen, the Europeans actually respect Rubio. They said Rubio is solid and someone that's more aligned with the priorities of both the United States and Europe. However, Vance, they blatantly said, I forgot which official. I'm gonna find this really quick, which official it was. Where was it? Yeah, no, it was just an unnamed European diplomat. He literally said, JD Vance hates us.
He does.
Yeah, look, once again, I mean, it's so confusing, because the I understand. I clearly understand. I'm not gonna dispute the strategic value of Greenland. But are you really gonna lose your alliance with the Europeans? The Europeans of all nations, they're still, I mean, I understand the United States is much stronger than the Europeans. But the Europeans are still the Europeans. They're your first line. The first line you have to defend when you fight against Russia, if it comes to it, God forbid. You need to hold the line up there. That's important. Like,
Sid,
yeah, the Baltics.
I want to question, when did Russia become an adversary to Trump? When did that happen? So far throughout his term, I mean, what has Trump said? Putin's a good guy. Putin wants peace.
It's his ego.
Putin wants a fair deal.
Ego.
It's his ego. It's because he didn't win a Nobel Peace Prize. He's now decided, okay, well, since being peaceful isn't going to work and get my name into the legacy book, what else could do it? Maybe taking over Greenland.
Yeah, I mean,
it's pathetic. It's truly pathetic.
Donald Trump is pathetic. I wanna have a comprehensive discussion about Greenland, but it's so hard, because it's hard for us to debate about this, because it's not necessarily a debate about actual strategy. It's a debate because it's not enacted with strategy. They're lucky that there is some strategy there that they can publicly put out, but there's definitely, outside things. But the first indication of true retaliation from the European Union, Denmark has essentially signaled that if the United States moves into Greenland, it's the end of NATO. And there's going to be the people, there's always going to be those people that are like, NATO doesn't do anything for us, blah, blah, blah. Like, we are NATO. NATO is nothing without us. That may be true. That NATO loses a bulk of its power without the United States. However, the United States loses a lot of strategic value. A lot of strategic value. NATO was designed to be the deterrent to the Soviets and has now been created to be a deterrent and a security group towards uh, the overall East. Because some people will say that China is not aggressive, Russia's not aggressive. We alienate them, blah blah blah. Look at China's aggression at Taiwan. If China gets control of Taiwan, they're going to control the military aspect of the world for a very long time because Taiwan is the best producer of efficient semiconductors, of the top quality semiconductors. And while I understand it's important that we need to move away from Chinese rare earth minerals, etc., we need to do it the proper way without alienating. We don't need to lose. We shouldn't have to lose to gain, or we shouldn't have to, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? You shouldn't have to lose to gain in this scenario because you're losing a lot more than you're gaining.
Yeah, and I want to just jump in here. And a lot of people question what would happen if NATO were to be disbanded. And I think when something's working, there's a tendency to want to change it. Simply because complacency is always a little boring, right? Sitting still is always a little boring. When it comes to NATO, it's been relatively effective. We've had many, many, many years of peace. The world has not broken out into world war since then, and you can say a whole bunch of different factors for that. But NATO has done its job in keeping the US safe. NATO has done its job in keeping its European countries safe. No NATO country has been attacked. There's a reason that Ukraine wants to join NATO. There's a reason for that. It's because NATO does keep their allies and their members safe. And when you try and disband NATO, I'm not exactly sure what the end goal is here. If it's isolationism, we have seen countless times throughout American history that does not work. Isolationism has never worked. And at the end of the day, you always end up getting dragged back into a war. So why would we end the current process that has made us safe and that has kept the world relatively safe? Why would we get rid of that? I will never understand what the justification is from the Trump side. And also, if you look at Europe, I'm not sure if you saw this, but as of the day we're recording this, there was an NBA game in London. I think it was Orlando versus Memphis. And they were singing the national anthem, and one person yelled out, like, let Greenland be, or like, keep Greenland safe. And the entire arena started cheering for that person. People in Europe do not want this. People in Greenland do not want this. People in Greenland would actually be willing to make a trade deal with the US. They've said that. But over 80% of them don't want to be a part of the US.
If you told someone in 2022 or something, or even before that, 2015, that on social media there would be trending edits of the European Union military versus the United States military, or the EU dividing up the United States, blah blah blah. They would think you're crazy. And like you said, it's a touching topic for me because my interest in geopolitics as a whole, the thing that probably kickstarted my interest in politics when I was in third grade, fourth grade, maybe fifth grade, was my first ever speech in a speech and debate tournament was about NATO. It was about
Crazy.
It was about NATO and the NATO response to North Korea if North Korea were to be aggressive. Again, I mean, with Greenland specifically, it's where did this all come from? Where is this? First of all, where's the like who came up with this? Because there are so many more important flashpoints. Because with all this tariff mess going on, everything still goes through China. Everything comes here from China. Like fentanyl, like the tariffs were imposed for quote unquote fentanyl stopping. Majority of it comes through these fentanyl potent materials that come from China. So you should be supporting Europe and their initiatives to moving away from Chinese reliance, because a lot of countries that you've slapped tariffs on because of quote unquote unfair trade practices, they've ended up aligning with China more. I believe Japan signed a trade deal with China. South Korea signed a trade deal with China. India signed a trade deal with China. Um, I it's kind of it's counterproductive. It's very, very, very counterproductive.
Yeah. You know, it's very interesting. Two things I want to say here. Number one, I guess the reason that our military is unable to go help out in Iran like Trump said that they would, I mean, he gave them a hard red line and then broke it. Something I actually agree with JD Vance on. If you're going to put a red line down, something that Obama did too, and then broke it as well. If you're going to put a red line down, you got to carry through with it. Because if you don't, all you're doing is embarrassing yourself on the world stage. But he put a red light down in Iran, said if you continue to kill protesters, we're going to have to do something about it. Trump didn't do anything. When it comes to Taiwan, we're doing nothing. So what exactly is our military doing right now? Are they so caught up in Minnesota affairs and Greenland affairs that they can't actually do what they're
They're
supposed to be
watching
doing?
RFK and Pete Hegseth see who can do more pull-ups.
They're at the airport watching that
Yeah.
with Sean Duffy right there next to them. No, but my point here is, what exactly is Trump's? What is Trump doing with the military right now?
It's very confusing. It's I mean,
It is.
it's like I haven't been able to see a like kind of I haven't seen a non-confused analysis of Trump foreign policy and military policy. Um Again, I wish I could remember which president. They specifically warned against the military industrial complex. Who was it? Was it Eisenhower? I think it was
It was.
Eisenhower.
It was
It's
Eisenhower in his farewell address.
because of you know, and then also there was Truman because of MacArthur wanting to nuke China. It was it's ironic. It came from one of the most decorated generals in American history, the first supreme commander of the Allied forces,
hmm
and he warned against it. Our military right now is kind of like where are they? Because we've pulled out of wars. We've pulled out all of this. We just had an operation in Venezuela. We're talking about security in Greenland. We're giving empty threats to bomb Iran. He just signed it like $1 trillion military budget. And all that does is help the military industrial complex. Because guess what? As soon as he signed it, and as soon as they know the date, it's gonna go into effect. I don't know, but I think it will. Everyone's gonna flood in. They're gonna start buying Palantir. They're gonna start buying Lockheed. They're gonna start buying Raytheon. They're gonna start buying all these defense stocks, and all it does is bolster the military industrial complex at the expense. I mean, in my opinion, at the expense of the American people. Because while I agree I agree with a strong defense budget. This is unnecessary. We're not in a state of war. We're not threatened because we've befriended Russia now. Where Putin's a great guy apparently, and we're not doing much about China's encroachment in Taiwan, and we're not doing anything in Iran. We're not doing anything in the Middle East. We pulled out of Afghanistan. We pulled out of Iraq. Like we have some troops there, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Why do we need an increase? We don't need an increase in military budget. This money should be spent on infrastructure. I feel like high speed rail, if done correctly, not the way Gavin Newsom wanted to do it. If high speed rail is if they invest in that effectively and efficiently, it would vastly benefit and advance American society. I believe there's so many infrastructure things that need to be done. Cleaning up the streets, that's huge. It's not like the streets are crazy dirty, but cleaning up the streets. You may not believe it. Like the right may not believe in climate change. I believe in climate change, but
Thank
a
you.
lot of the right may not believe in climate change. But it should be pretty obvious that pollution is not good for the environment. Put that money towards fighting pollution, or put that money towards cleaning up the streets, and then let's reform welfare. Well, if you don't like shrink it or not, let's reform it. Let's work on making the spending that this country does as efficient as possible. And because I'm a firm believer in before abolishing something or before completely removing something, it's important to see if you can foster any good out of it. Is there anything you can salvage? Is there anything beneficial for the American people? My opposition to welfare or expanded welfare, it has nothing. It's not because I don't care about people, but it's because some people get on welfare when they don't need it. Other civilians are subsidizing other civilians where they don't necessarily need it. It's and I'm not, again, I understand the single mother with 3 kids struggling to pay rent. She needs it. I get it. She needs it. She's working 2 jobs. She needs it. But the college student that is getting paid, they're getting money from their parents, and et cetera, et cetera. They don't need SNAP. They're getting money. They can work a job. They're gonna work a job. They don't need SNAP necessarily. And like things like that. I mean, we should be, and then again, foster opportunity. Let's invest. Let's create jobs. Let's invest. Let's create fair competition in the market. Let's put the money towards that. Sorry, that's a little economic rant right there, but I feel like it had to be said. $1 trillion military budget for Greenland,
Greenland.
the
In
California State
Minnesota.
Patrol in Minnesota, one of our own states. $1 trillion for one of our own states.
One of our own states is currently being invaded by the federal government. Let's just make that clear. And it's because the federal government is spending money on that when the money should be going to projects that would better the lives of the American people. It's that simple.
This line of thinking from the Trump administration, again, you can oppose them or not. It single-handedly killed the conservative movement in Canada. I mean, I know they grew huge, but Pierre, I can't even pronounce his last name. Pierre should have won that election. He lost his riding. He lost his own riding. He would have been the prime minister. But you tariffed Canada with no, there's absolutely zero legitimacy in that. The healthcare stakeholders oppose it. The financial market opposes it. The trade sector opposes it. It doesn't do much to counter fentanyl. You did all of that. And then not only that, you essentially alienated your conservative ally to the north. The first time in so long you're going to have a conservative ally up north. And you oppose them. It's doing damage to conservatives worldwide. You're alienating your allies with this whole Greenland thing, which is nonsense because it's 60,000 people, bro. Our least populated state has more people than Greenland. California State Patrol has more people than Greenland, I'm gonna guess. Or California, like, put together California's law enforcement. It's unnecessary. It's such a head scratcher. It's this head scratcher here and there. In message, or in maybe not in message. I don't necessarily agree with the way he speaks. Immigration enforcement is important. National security is important. Fair trade is important. But you don't do it he's doing it in a very populist manner. Immigration. First of all, you're not even getting the numbers you promised. You're not even deporting people like you said you would. And you're committing atrocities around the way, and you're granting these people absolute immunity. Then, what I say, national security. There's so many more threats to national security than Greenland. Greenland is secure. It's pretty secure.
Mm-hmm.
And then economics or fair trade. It's the definition. It's like there's a little fire in your house and you want to put it out. So but then you're like, you know what? I'm gonna put it out. I'm gonna pour a bunch of gasoline on it and see what happens. It's a liquid, right? We've learned this. The Smoot Hotly tariff should have been the lesson. It won't work. $1 trillion military budget. I'm going on a little tangent here. I mean,
I can tell.
It's so questionable. It's head scratcher. This is not what I would have voted for. I probably would have voted for Donald Trump in 2024, not knowing what would happen now.
Jesus Christ, dude! You would have voted for Trump?
I mean, I would have voted for Trump over Kamala. I agree. I aligned with him with the way with most of his policies until then. On January 21st, he went completely back on it. On January 20th or 21st or whatever, he immediately went back on half the things he said. I should have expected.
With all due respect,
I would have expected.
That's your fault, man.
It would have been my fault, of course. It would have been my fault. However, now, what has he done? He hasn't done anything but kill whatever chance he had at continuing this movement. Because MAGA is dying. I think it's objective to say. It's not inflammatory. I mean this as respectfully as possible. MAGA is dying. The movement is going away. You have so many people who are stuck in the middle. Like I can't, like, what do I do? I mean, I can't back this. And the rest of them are going to groyper movements or far right movements, which is even scarier. And
Yeah.
it's
You know,
something.
I will just say that at the end of the day, Trump has insane popularity amongst his base still, and he's going to continue to have that popularity. The problem is you can't win an election without centrists. And
Of course.
no matter what you say,
Absolutely.
centrists are not backing the current agenda because the current agenda is stupid. It's flat out stupid. And when you're spending so much money and time on Greenland, and when you're spending all this time in Minnesota, and you don't actually care about what you're doing abroad, and when peaceful protesters are being killed by their government in Iran, and when China is continuously threatening to invade Taiwan, his foreign policy is completely backwards. Ukraine is still being invaded by Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Palestinians are still being killed by Israel. The world is a hot mess right now, and Donald Trump cares more about deploying troops in Minnesota to squash peaceful protests. I don't know what we're doing.
He said no new wars, and he's essentially going to start one in one of his own states.
Exactly. With Tim Walz, who he ran against in 2024.
I mean, it's really questionable. It's really,
Welcome
really
to
questionable.
Sid and Ishaan's tangent of
Yeah. I mean,
the first episode we're recording. Well, thank you for listening to us rant about politics for an hour and 40 minutes, whatever this podcast ends up being. I've been Ishaan.
I'm Mr. Art, and we'll see you next week. We will see you next week.
Peace.